All right, we are one day removed from Thiago Santos versus Johnny Walker. We're gonna go over in this video everything on the main card minus Holland and Dawkins and the prelims. So Holland and Dawkins will have in a separate video, and then the prelims will have in a separate video. So we'll start from the top. Thiago Santos and Johnny Walker. When I saw this announced, I was hoping for a good fight, but what ended up happening was unfortunately what I kind of was anticipating was going to happen, just based off what we saw last fight with Santos and Rakic. Granted, Walker had a nice finish against Ryan Spann, but I was more kind of unsure about it would be for Santos and also, frankly, for Walker too, given this is his arguably, I think, his biggest name. Not maybe not best talent, just given the stage Thiago is in his career, plus with his injuries, but at least for sure biggest name by recognition. And by far one of the least entertaining fights of the night, probably,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
definitely
absolutely.
not what you would have hoped it would be. And this seemed like a pretty universally agreed on opinion. I was going through, like, I was reading some of the comments and stuff, and there was a pretty fair amount of disappointment, as there should be. I mean, we have the numbers here pulled up. You have again light heavyweights. These are 205ers, and these are both guys with a bunch of knockouts of their 22 wins. Santos, I forget how many he's got for sure. A bunch of them are knockouts. Same with Johnny Walker, as that's kind of getting looked at. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of finishes.
Yeah, it's insane, man.
Um,
And look at the
the
people that
over
he's
under was set at
finished.
1.5. Yeah, set at 1.5, and it was like when I locked in on the over, it was even. Well, not even. It was they were both minus 110. I don't know what it closed at, but I can't imagine it deviated too much. So the lines were close on it. Again, insinuating they expect a short fight. And I think before the fight started, ESPN was showing some additional odds, and I think the odds for it to go to decision for either one of them to win was like plus 800 or something. Like I wouldn't have assumed the decision, but I thought for sure it was going to go over 1.5. Just again, I think you mentioned as well, you felt the same way.
Well, nobody thought that, especially where they had set that line. I mean, in I guess in retrospect, no, in retrospect, it
I
made no
wouldn't have
sense either
expected a
way.
decision or into round five, but I wasn't expecting. I wouldn't have been surprised by a quick finish, but I was expecting longer than 1.5. I think is the best way to put how I felt about it. Because again, I'm looking at Santos's last couple, or in his last one, mainly his last one, because it was just a very timid performance by
Yeah,
both him and
yeah,
Rakic. Because we were watching that last one, that's when we were in Vegas. It was during the three title fights with
yep.
Jan and Izzy, and then Piotr and Aljo, and then Nunes and Anderson. And I remember I was like, dude, this is going to be a great fight, and it sucked. And they mentioned it. DC mentioned it on during this fight. He said that last
Yeah,
fight sucked. I think he mentioned it a couple times,
yeah,
and
yeah.
he's right.
DC was throwing shade at Rockets, man.
Yeah, that's what they were. He was saying. I guess so. Like, I guess like his producers like told him like, hey, people are people are saying you're throwing shade at him, but it's not inaccurate. It was an inactive fight. Like, if you want, you can
Yeah,
pull it up there too if it lets you right there. If you click the Rocket one, I think I was looking at it the other day. Um, I think if you click the event name, maybe that'll show you right there under event. Yeah, right there. That might give it to you. So I think that was like 40, 46 to 39 or something. 49 to 36. I mean, come on, dude. Light heavyweights, back to back, and these are going the distance. So that went 3 rounds, 49 to 36. This one went 5 rounds, and he had a lower output, right? He landed less strikes than Santos did. Was it
Santos. I think he
44?
had more. Yeah,
44,
lower this time around. Yeah.
lower than his last fight. And then
Jeez,
he
man.
asks for at the end of the fight, he says, "Oh, Dana, let's talk." That was, I guess, the last fight on his contract. He's maybe get some more money. If you're gonna base it off your last two performances, I don't know if you're gonna get more money. You'll probably, I would want to see him get another contract. Maybe not like a 7 fight deal, but because so now like we can like kind of discuss what some of the good things for him in the fight were. The power is clearly still there. I mean, that's kind of hard to go away, but you could hear it in some of those leg kicks. And Walker took like one distinct. I remember like one left punch. I forgot it was in the fifth or third round. There was definitely more power punches. At least it felt more power punches landed by Santos. Yeah, Walker had four more significant strikes, but I don't remember anyone versus. I remember more from Santos because they were loud, they were thunderous. I think one of them or two of the kicks left a mark on Walker as well. But again, just overall, not what you would expect from the number. What was it, number 5 versus number 10, something like that
Yeah,
in the light
yeah.
heavyweight?
So I have a slightly different take on this. While I agree that the output was just for light heavies, the output wasn't there. But this is what we've seen from Santos, like you said in his last fight. It was the same performance, except at least for me, and I may be wrong, but what I thought I was seeing is a more technical fight. They were both they were both throwing feints. They were both waiting on counters. Santos was being intelligent in that he realized that Walker had at least the leg length on him, and so instead of trying to close in and punch him just willy nilly, he was using his legs to try to chop at him, to try to sort of bait Walker rather into closing that gap, so then Santos could get his counters in, and I felt like that was really effective for him. Is it does it make for a interesting fight? Not, I mean, it depends on what you're looking at. Like for me, it was interesting because I definitely thought it was more calculated. It was more technical than, you know, just a couple of like, blubber guys like swinging at each other. But for a main card, I can see it being a sort of lose lose for everybody. It's a lose for the UFC. It's a lose for us because if the fans aren't happy at the end of the day, what does it matter, right?
I mean, I can't imagine. I didn't watch the post fight press conferences. Dana hasn't been to the last couple. I don't think he was there for yesterday's either. I would imagine he wasn't exactly thrilled. Again, like you alluded to, I can't imagine he was happy with how that fight went. Seems again, like I said, universal. The fans weren't happy with how it went, and overall, the main event sucked. The main card sucked. The first, you had the lead off with Hernandez, disgusting knockout. We'll touch on that too. But outside of that, the other four fights, not entertaining, at least for me. We were discussing it last night too. It seems like we're both on that same page. So just to wrap up what I had to say with Santos and Walker, I, the other thing to highlight that I that don't know anything, like we don't fight, obviously we don't know, we don't like train or anything, but with, and I give that as a precursor to what I'm about to say, is because listening to the corner work for Walker, John Kavanaugh just kept telling him between every round, just keep going. He kept saying like, do the same thing, do the same thing. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a close fight, but don't you want to have him separate himself out a little bit, like kind of get out in the lead versus keep doing the same thing? I feel he had like what both men had more majority of their strikes were leg strikes, which is fine. But again, for light heavyweights, single digit head strikes, weird. Single digit body strikes for Walker, weird. And then 32, what is that? 32 leg strikes. Okay,
Yep.
that's fine. Like I'm not saying don't throw leg kicks, but he kept saying keep throwing those feints, keep throwing those feints. And I was telling you last night, I'm all for feints if they lead to something. He didn't use the feints for anything though. He just was throwing them to throw them, and I didn't feel like the feints directly led to anything substantial. Which is why I was just wondering, like, okay, like if you're gonna tell him use feints, give him like a follow up, or like if you see he's not doing what you were anticipating him to do with the feints, reroute. Call an audible, be like, all right, fuck the feints, it's not working out. Let's do this instead. He kept telling him the same thing, and then one of the rounds he told him, I think you won that, and I was like, dude, at best, tell him that was a toss up. Most of those rounds, especially the latter stages, were not very like clearly decisive just due to inactivity. You would have to base it more on octagon control versus strikes thrown. There's no takedowns to gauge. There was no control against cage or anything to gauge. It was just strictly going to be strikes and control of the cage, control of the octagon.
Yeah.
So again, my final thing is underwhelmed by it. I don't think this really gives an answer for either of them in terms of their trajectory. I think it seemed the moment was maybe too big for Walker because he seemed like didn't really capitalize. Given where they are in their stages of their career, I would have expected Walker to honestly have done better than he did. And for Santos, I have no more clarity than I did going into that fight. I was wondering because they're saying, oh, he's saying he's fully healthy now, his knees are 100%. I didn't really, not that he looked injured, but he seemed hesitant. So I don't know if that's because it didn't feel so confident about it or what it was, but underwhelming in my opinion. And then we go to now Oliveira and Price. This again was one of the ones, at least leading into the fight happening yesterday. They're talking it up. This is, it's not the co-main, it's not the main, but this should be a great fight. When I saw it, I wasn't expecting it to be a bad fight, but I wasn't expecting it to be what they were portraying it out to be, and it pretty much ended up being what I kind of thought it would be. This one was also set at 1.5, which was surprising to me. I I took the over on this one too. Hit easy, one
Yeah.
decision. Uh, More activity than the big boys. As you can see, we have what is it, 65 strikes for Oliveira versus 64 for Price. But again, not for me. It wasn't not a bad fight. Like I would say, the Santos Walker fight was not a good fight. But this one again, not what they made it out to be.
Let's call it better, but it's certainly not.
Better, yeah,
Certainly not.
yeah, for
I
sure.
wouldn't say good, and I definitely wouldn't say great. For me, I think the peak of this fight was towards the end of round one, because they were both
Yeah,
swinging at each other. They were engaging in these ground battles, and then round two, you could start to see them sliding down the slope, and round three just became this sloppy sort of. It, I can't stand when fights end up that way, and especially as welterweights, it makes no sense for you to be that sloppy. You would think you'd have a little bit better conditioning, and for somebody like Price, that's always talking, or that was talking about my conditioning's on point, my conditioning's on point, dude. You did not look conditioned in round three. You
yeah.
know?
Round three, they both looked pretty exhausted. I remember, I think again, one of the announcers mentioned what you just said, and I was looking at him. I was like, he looks pretty tired though.
Yeah,
Like I understand it's a third round of a fight, but if he's advertising conditioning, he's in the final round. I'm not saying he shouldn't have a drop of sweat or be breathing a little heavy, but he looked pretty tired. So I don't know if that's a fair thing to say. Like, oh, he was talking about his conditioning. He was talking about it, but I didn't seem like. So for me on Niko Price too, I mean, every time this guy fights, they talk about those two up kick finishes he has. Yeah, those are badass. But this fight, his last was, I think that's three straight decisions, if I'm not mistaken. He had this one, he had the one against Olive Pereira, and yeah, the one against Cerrone. Um, that one ended up being a no contest against Cerrone because he tested positive for weed. I mean, look at those. I mean, you had Luque, who you lost to. You had Cerrone, who you drew to. You had Pereira, who you lost to, and you had Oliveira, who you won. But again, I wouldn't like be so happy about that if that was me and I won. I won that fight the way he won it. They keep talking about him because of those up kicks. If he didn't have those up kicks, what are you advertising with Niko Price? Because at least based on the
his
last three
his
fights,
mustache. I like his mustache.
sure,
If he
but
kind of gets some twirls on it, puts a little top hat on, I think it'll
has to
be
get some wax.
yeah, yeah,
You should ask the guy, the cut man, to add some
yeah.
Vaseline there so he could work on it.
You know what he reminds me of? One of those like 1920s, like, hey, put him up, see, like one of those
That's
guys.
exactly how Eddie Wineland looked. Eddie Wineland when he was fighting Sean O'Malley when he got knocked out pretty brutally. I was thinking the same thing. He had the twirl, everything. He looked just like it. He was even like standing like him. But yeah, again for Price here, I mean, I understand fans probably like him. He's entertaining. Again, he's had those. You see those. He got finished, and then he had a KO finish. Those bottom two fights. Okay, cool. But what have you done lately? Also is applicable. Last three fights got the decision. I'm not taking a dump on him because they went to decisions. But even the Pereira fight, it was like I was kind of hopeful for that, and that was kind of an underwhelming fight for what I was expecting too.
Yeah,
So I mean, again, I'm not saying time to go to Bellator, but again, just based on what they had built it up to be, and just to kind of hammer home the point of how I was disappointed by the main card, this one also was a disappointment for me. And then this one, I mean, Jesus, again, middleweights. Cirkunov made his middleweight debut from he was fighting at light heavy. His last his last fight. I looked at this fight. I believe this was the third leg. Well, this was the first leg of my three leg. I did three over 1.5. So I ended up hitting it, but I was in. I was surprised this one they had it at 1.5 because of Jotko. I was looking at Jotko. I think we've seen him fight, but I just couldn't remember. I saw the record. I was like, this guy, I can't remember. Is this guy a finisher or not? And I looked at this guy's wins are majority decision. Um, Look at that. One, two, three. The last five fights have all gone decision. And then you look at Cirkunov. If you click his name there, he's got like he's been up. Either he's the one finishing or he's been finished. He's been a part of more of those. Look at that. All in the first. I think this was the first time they said he had a fight go into the third round, and I think the first time in like 6 fights they saw a second round or something, win or loss, some crazy number like that. So I guess that's kind of why they said at 1.5. They're like, well, let's just find the happy medium and do the 1.5. But I was like, nah. I mean, I see this being probably for sure going 1.5, and it did. But again, if you go back to the numbers on the fight for middleweight guys, look at what is that, man? 41
yeah.
to 41. When you go to decision, you're averaging what is that? Less than three strikes a minute, both guys. Less than three significant strikes a minute. Sorry, for per what is it, 15 minutes, right? Yeah, so yeah. I mean, come on, dude. Like the output's got to be greater than that. Granted, yeah, okay. Cirkunov had 5 takedowns, so when you take him down, the opening might not always be able to land those strikes. But like, I didn't really distinctly recall him really taking advantage of the 5 takedowns, and that's probably ultimately why they ended up leaning towards Jotko. Because I can't remember too frequently seeing 5 takedowns to one, 4 minutes of control time, equal strikes, and the guy loses. Uh, I was pretty, I was kind of like watching this fight. I was kind of getting lulled by the inactivity. So maybe this was a bad decision, but just given how like dull it was for me, I was like, I guess, yeah, sure. I guess that was the ruling. Like I didn't even have an opinion.
So
I don't know if you distinctly felt someone one over the other, but I didn't really have one.
No, I was also a little split on it, but before that, I wanted to say for me, I felt like this was a little bit like it reminded me of the Santos and Walker fight in the sense that I felt like it was very technical. Like, yeah, it wasn't very entertaining, but they were both utilizing a lot of technique and being intelligent semi in the way they were fighting. And sort of similar to the Price fight, it got very sloppy towards the end of
Especially for Cirkunov.
it just became bad, you know. And again, if you're a middleweight, you know, how are you gassing like that, man? It makes no sense to me. You know, you're in probably an ideal, you know, weight and height ratio. Work out a little bit more, man. Like put the fork down, go run, whatever you got to do. It makes no sense to me for you to be done like that after the first round. 5 minutes, you know. That I don't know.
For
But this is the
Cirkunov,
card.
I'm thinking that maybe the that drop in weight class maybe impacted the cardio. You know, again, third round he looked absolutely toast,
Hey,
and I
since
think
sorry to cut you off, but since we're on that subject, I who was telling me Jocko moved up? So Serkinov moved down, and then Jocko apparently moved up. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure. I thought they're. I remember before the fight here. No, Sean Strickland's a middleweight. Eric Anders was a middleweight at the time. Those are all middleweights.
Yeah. So then,
Andra,
yeah, that
yeah,
wasn't.
no, because they were
Yeah,
mentioning he's kind of not. He's not the biggest 185er, so that would have maybe made sense. But those guys are all 185ers. They just showed. Um, yeah, I mean, not much more to add here. I was just kind of underwhelmed again. I was hoping this would be a good fight, but I'm not again entirely surprised. Just given Jato's kind of been just going to decision. Um, but yeah,
yeah.
and the one shining light, but again, you can't say it was a good fight. It was a great performance. I think he got a performance of the night as he should have. Hernandez does again. I think what you should do against the last minute replacement. Breeden, I can't remember. Did they say he was making his debut? I forgot. This is not his original opponent. Hernandez's original opponent. Um, but when you have someone step in late notice like that and you can finish him the way you finished him, yeah, it looks like it was his debut. He was on the contender series and lost, and then did a couple fights at FAC, and then lost here. Stepped in last minute. So I mean, you always it's always nice to see someone do that. Hernandez did that himself, and he won. He beat Benel Dariush stepping in late. Um, but yeah, I mean, well done. I mean, it was beautiful. The combo work was great, and then just he knocks out the mouthpiece, and then that final punch, the way he goes down was just well, like a movie. Like
Yeah.
they told him in the movie, they told the actor make sure you fall down like this, and he did. And great performance for him. He called out his original opponent. What was it, Leonardo Santos? What was his name? I forgot. Leonardo something. Um, Good for him. He lost against Moises last. It's alternating wins and losses, as we can see there. But again, he did what he should have done against someone like that.
I mean, I don't really have much more input other than what you've put in. That knockout was amazing. I loved that the slow mo of the mouthpiece because that was actually the slowest I've ever seen a mouthpiece fly across the octagon. It usually disappears underneath or like ends up outside somewhere, but this was just
Yeah,
it arced itself over.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so that was our main card. Again, like I was mentioning, I was unfortunately underwhelmed by it. The prelims were great. We're gonna discuss that in our separate video. Um, So yeah, I mean, let us know what your takes on that was. I felt, kind of what I was reading. It seemed like some of the things we were sharing are kind of what other people were sharing in terms of their feelings on how it kind of went. They were saying the same about Bellator being underwhelming. So yeah, let us know what you guys think. That's it. Later.